I'm going to start with an overview of what we're going to do today. So this is our GDPR journey. So an overview of the regulations, the governing principles, how to be compliant, continuous integration and security tooling. This will be signposting only. We've already done a talk on some of the security tooling that Jay did a little while ago. So if you want to find out a little bit more about things like Hackers on, Burp Suite, etc., just look back at that talk and you can get in touch with us all through Grey Hats as well. So who am I? So I'm Saskia. I'm the co-founder of DI Security and Manchester Grey Hats. So Digital Interruption, that's my company that I run with Jay. We are ethical hackers and security specialists. We believe that DevSecOps is the future, so we do a lot of work around that. But we also do the normal stuff like pen testing, we also do training, we develop security tooling, and we do compliance health checks. So not just GDPR, we do PCI as well, e-privacy, there's the Poppy stuff that's coming into South Africa, so there's a lot of stuff on the compliancy horizon at the moment that needs to be considered. Manchester Grey Hats is a community group that we've set up, which is about the next generation of security testers and security consultants. So we do all sorts of stuff with that. We have workshops once a month. We also do capture the flag. We've got a hack space, Slack channel, all of this kind of stuff. So that's quite useful if you're interested in learning a bit more. So, what is the GDPR? So it's the General Data Protection Regulation. We've kind of gone through the bulk of it in the previous talk, so I'm not going to sort of spend too much time on it. What we do want to talk about really is the principles, though. So the regulation itself is 6 principles, 99 articles, 173 recitals. It's a completely riveting read. I do recommend it. It looks like that. So I think I've got about half an hour. I thought we could go through all of it and we could talk about how we would interpret it as testers. So if everyone can see at the back, we'll start with... No, maybe not. So, through the medium of kitties, what are the principles? Principle 1. Judge Kitty. He is judging you. Processing must be lawful, fair and transparent. Judge Kitty says, if you can't or won't explain what you do with your personal data, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. Fussy Kitty. It must be purpose specific. If you can't demonstrate why you need the data, then you don't need the data. By specific, we mean granular. So if you're basing it on something like consent, it needs to be consent for every single processing that you do. You need to have a lawful basis for each piece of processing that you do. So you can't say everything is a contract. You can't say everything is legitimate interest. You can't say everything is consent. Don't use consent if you don't have to. It's awful. It's a minefield. Most of what you do will be performance of a contract or legitimate interest, unless you work for a public body, and then it might be to save somebody's life. So that's how you would consent to sharing medical records if somebody was unconscious. Or it might be in the public interest, so like, I don't know, terrorists and stuff. Principle 3, minimal. Don't be like Bloaty Kitty. Irrelevant personal data poses an unnecessary security risk and can be expensive and expensive to store and secure. Accurate and up to date, like Fussy Kitty. If it's not accurate and you no longer need it, either correct it or delete it. Time limited. Once it's expired, delete it. If you think you still need it, anonymise it. Time Kitty is my favourite kitty. He has a time machine. What we basically mean by this principle is that all the data that you have that's personally identifiable must have a retention period. And you must delete that data after that retention period. So somebody was asking about dead people earlier. It's kind of irrelevant because you should be deleting that information once processing is no longer relevant. So a retention period cannot be forever. You have to have something in place that says, I will keep this information for so long, and you need to advertise that. You do that within the privacy notice itself. So basically, you'd be looking for booking information. 7 years is about the maximum. That's based on a regulatory requirement. HMRC would be 10 years. Anything else, you need a business reason, you need to justify why you're keeping that information for a period of time. Coming from a security company myself, I would say that if you have data that's personally identifiable, that you don't use, it's non-customer data, so it's something that's generated a quote or an interest, but you don't have a legitimate reason to keep processing it. Don't keep it for longer than you have to, because if you breach on that data, you're going to look like a donkey. Security kitty. Data should be confidential and secure. If it's not secure, it's not compliant. This is a tech issue. You need to be secure. So what's the best way to ensure that your data is secure? Test it. Don't test with live data. Just don't. Anonymise it. Don't test with it. This isn't something that we should even be thinking about. It's really not secure to do that. So when you're doing any kind of pen tests, the first thing that you'll be looking for is legacy test data that's hanging around in places where it shouldn't be. One of the main reasons that test data is insecure is if you save it in the wrong place, it's not necessarily encrypted or behind like a firewall, you could end up breaching even though all your other processes are actually correct and in place. So, what does compliant look like? It does not look like Hackathon. So, we're going to come out of the presentation for a minute, let's hope we can get back in again. Okie doke. So this is Hackathon. This is a really, really helpful tool, and I do suggest that you download it and have a play with it, because it basically will let you hack shit without getting arrested. So it's a sandbox environment, and it's full of vulnerabilities, so you can do things like brute forcing, you can try and put some SQL injection in there. There's guidance that will help you to do exercises, and again, you know, you won't get arrested, which is always nice. So what I thought we could do very briefly is a quick compliance check of Hackathon. So why is Hackathon not compliant? So I'm just going to get my notes just to make sure that I've got this correct. Telling us that it wants us to do is register on the site. So we've got a couple of options for doing that. We've got sign up and we've got register on the site. So let's go to register on the site. So we can see here that it wants a first name, last name, username, email address and password. So that's PII. So when you're thinking about personally identifiable information, think about the 3 Ps. So that's anything around your public life, personal life or private life. So that means that any of your work information, if it identifies you as a living person, is also PII. So they're not telling us what they're going to do with this information. They've got a username here, yet they're also asking me for my email address. So how do I log in? Why do you need both of it? What's my identifier on that? There's no privacy notice here. Lawful Kitty's not happy about that. Lawful Kitty says we have to have a privacy notice. We have to be displaying our right to information, our right to be informed. What are you going to do with my data? So they've put everything under terms and conditions. By clicking register, you have agreed to our terms and conditions. I can't see a retention period on there. Time Kitty's not happy. How long are you keeping my data? It's also saying there's no lawful basis in there for what you're going to do with it. It's not granular. There's no consent. Yeah. This is not a privacy notice, and by bundling it in with the terms and conditions, they're forcing you to accept something that's not visible. So again, Lawful Kitty is not happy. What we'd also expect to see within a privacy notice is that one of the things they would say is we're going to keep your information secure, so Security Kitty's not happy either. We might assume that this uses cookies if it was an actual e-commerce website. Cookies are personally identifiable information. Whether you agree with me or not, it does not matter. The law says that cookies are now personally identifiable information. So, unless they're strictly necessary, you need consent for them. We're not going to go into cookies. That's a whole separate workshop. It's joyful. Right, okay. So, having done our little quick and dirty review of Hackathon, there we go. So we can fix that stuff, for sure, that's fairly easy. But that only gets our application compliant for that one snapshot in time, because the assumption would be that things will change, things will move, your applications will add in new functions, you'll have new services. So you need to stay compliant. So what do the regulations say about staying compliant? Well, they say you have to implement technical and organisational measures to show that you have considered integrating data protection into your processing activities at every stage. So how would we do that in practice? As testers, what does that actually mean to us? Well, bake it in. So if you bake security and compliance into the development pipeline, you therefore reduce the risk of slipping back into a non-compliant environment. So the onus is now sitting on testers as to what it is that you test to retain that compliancy and to remain compliant. And I think that is one of the main areas about how it affects testers moving forward. So I think what might be helpful is to sort of say, on the basis of a web application that we'd be looking at, something that Hackathon would represent would be an e-commerce. So what do we actually mean by PII? Well, as we've said, it's anything that identifies you, but here's a few things. So user ID, login details, IP addresses, reference numbers, full names, addresses, emails, date of birth, phone number, bank details, credit card numbers, user-generated content, images or photos, emails, recordings, transcripts, location information, cookies. If you have free text boxes, anything that goes in, it could be PII because people are idiots and they will tell you everything. Anything unsolicited could be PII because people are idiots and they will give you everything. Anything that's an attachment could be PII. What are you using with Outlook? Is Outlook secure? It's not designed for PII, therefore should you be using it? So what are your secure transfer protocols when it comes to information? So this really is a technical issue as well. This is not just about having a nice, pretty record of processing and policies in place. They are important. But also, you need to make sure things are secure, because there are three hats. There's the company hat, which is data, that's brilliant, I want it forever. They've got all the things they can do with the data, yay! And then you have your customer hat, which is, what are you doing with my data? I don't want you to have my data. Why did I put my data on Tinder? Oh God, it's there forever. How shameful, what if someone breaches it? And then you have your hacker hat, which is, ha-ha, what can I do with your data? So the more information that you give a hacker, the more stuff they can do with your data, the bigger profile they can build. And if you are a client of Ashley Madison, they can brand you with it and do the blackmailings and all the things like that. So, I wouldn't know anything about that. We were in the news for SimVR, but not for Ashley Madison. So, some of these things on their own actually don't constitute personally identifiable information. A name on its own is not personally identifiable information if your name is John Smith. If your name is Saskia Coplans, it is, because I'm literally the only one in the world with my name. Cheers, parents. A postcode isn't on its own a list of postcodes, it's just a list of postcodes. So you can pseudonymise information as opposed to anonymise it, as long as you can guarantee that the pseudonymisation of that information doesn't get pulled back together. So that's end-to-end encryption. And you can anonymise using one-way encryption. If you want to anonymise data fields without taking entire rows out of your database, just put null instead, wherever there's PII. And based on what we were just saying about retention periods and deleting data after a retention period, you should be doing this anyway, because retention cannot be forever. Okay. So, we're going to talk about functional mapping, because it is literally my answer to everything. So, functional mapping is a system by which, instead of using a user story, which will tell you what the user wants to do with your application, you'll look at the functions of what your application is supposed to do, and then you can map requirements against those functions, and then you can look at what requirements you have in terms of the testing that you need to do, and that map, that pathway, will actually demonstrate that you've considered all the specific or potential vulnerabilities, compliancy failures, or security issues that you might have when you're putting that application together. Right? So bearing in mind this is about DevSecOps, we're not necessarily using this as a tool to become compliant with anything that's brownfield or legacy. It probably doesn't look great, because you've never been asked to do this before with that kind of stuff, you would probably want a specialist to come in and have a look at those sorts of things for you and do a health check. But this is stuff that you can think about within the development pipeline whilst you're working with your devs. So, key purpose. This is why I have my whiteboard. So we start with the key purpose. So what do we think the key purpose of e-commerce is?
Sell shit to people.
Sell shit to people! Awesome. I did not write that down on the slide. Any other ideas? Might we want to say something a little bit more of our description? No? Okay. I had a very fun weekend with Jay. We went through this. Yeah. To sell and distribute goods and services to customers worldwide through the use of a web application. Worldwide is important. The GDPR only relates to European Union citizens and residents. So if you were a Chinese website that only sold in China, or an Australian website that only sold in Australia, and you could guarantee somehow that all your customers were from only that country, the GDPR would not apply to you. I'm not sure how you would work that out. So it's probably best just to be compliant. So we've got the key purpose. From the key purpose, we then want to start thinking about what the core functions are. That wasn't supposed to flash up. We're now thinking about what the core functions are. So in order to sell shit to people, what does your web application need to do? What are the functions? Come on, posse, shout out.
Interface.
Interface, you say? So yeah, you need it. Come on, I need an assistant. You can do the writing. So interface, yes we do, we need an interface. We need something for our customer to interact with where they can see the shizzle that it is that we want them to buy. Oh yeah, so we just start 1, 2, 3, 4 and then the arrows move over. So interface.
It's large so people can read it.
Oh, what?
Read it large.
Can everybody read that?
So as we were saying, interface! Nice and big. Okay. What else? What other functionality might we need so that we can sell shit to people? Yes. Login. Yeah. Okay. So we'll have a login. That would be a sub-function of an interface. So that's brilliant. So we're actually looking at the 2 functional levels now. Yeah.
Checkout basket.
Brilliant. Yeah. Okay. We need the checkout basket. Awesome. Anything? Come on.
Back-end systems.
Back-end systems. Yeah. We need some back-ends. We need some APIs, we might want a database so that we can store the things. Well, we might want another application, but we're just doing a web app at the moment. You were nearly there.
Payment?
Payment, brilliant, yes we do. We want to do payments. We'll just shove it somewhere. It's not quite looking like I expected it to, but never mind.
Shipping details.
Shipping details, brilliant.
Emails, confirmation emails being sent out.
Yes, yeah, we've got that completion. We've called that because everything when you're talking about security sounds a bit gross. Completion, okay.
Send big.
So basically how this would look with a functional map is you would literally start with your functions going down in a list which would link to your key purpose, and then you can start breaking those core functions down into the functions that those functions need to have. So you can see that you're actually starting to build a picture of what it is that you want to do. So we've got interface, backend and storage, select, pay, shipping and completion. So you literally got everything, that's awesome. So once you understand that we're not just looking at testing a web app, we're testing a function of a web app and then maybe a sub-function of that web app's function, we can start looking at what requirements we need for that. So I was going to do a shout out for this one as well, but I think that this could be an interesting one. Does anybody want to do a few shout outs of what they think we might need for some of these? No? Okay. Here's one I made earlier. So we want to have some statements at this point. So in order for us to have a website or a web application, and the purpose of which is to sell shit to people, and the function of that would be through an interface, We might want to say that the user could not log into the application without knowledge of the password. And we might also want to say that a hacker couldn't get in, also without knowledge of the password, because that would be a security breach and that would be a big issue. We'd also want to have a statement that would say sensitive data should only be stored securely, personal data should be able to be corrected, deleted, restricted and exported. So that's looking at our data subject rights. It should not be logged in the back end. So basically you shouldn't log data anywhere except within the database or where it's secure. If you were to say to put passwords in a general log and you haven't secured those, then they're obviously very vulnerable. The application should behave correctly when malicious SQL characters are used in the application field or sent to the application, because you don't basically want someone to put in My Little Pony, give me all your passwords. And literally every time you hit My Little Pony, it gives you all the passwords. The application should behave correctly when a path containing directory navigation characters are sent to the application. Sensitive data should not be should not be transferred, and I don't know what that was supposed to say, or trapped in plain text. Don't put stuff in trapped plain text. So use HTTPS, don't use HTTP. So I think that's my favourite typo ever. So when we're looking at these requirements, you can see that they'll probably link actually to quite a number of our functions on the board. So who wants to have a stab at it? A user can't log into the application without knowledge of the password. What does that relate to on here, if you can see them?
Interface.
Yeah, what else?
Backend.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. So you can see that we'll be able to evidence that within several functions of this application we understand there are several points where this is an important thing that you want to be testing. And you'd be able to evidence and demonstrate that that was a secure application. Sensitive data should only be secured, stored securely. So encrypted or behind a firewall, what would that relate to on our beautiful board over here?
Payments.
Yeah?
That's credit card details.
It would basically relate to all the things. So we'd want to make sure that that's a pretty important one and pretty high up in terms of the regulations. Corrected, deleted, restricted and exported. Yeah, backend. Shouldn't be logged. I'm going to put it there for you, backend. Should behave correctly. Yeah, pretty much. And then sensitive data should not be transferred or tramped in plain text. Tramping that data. Yeah, so it's basically anywhere where you might move data. So anywhere where that data could be talking, so any API that you have, any conversation that it's having between the front end and back end, anything that's to do with the database. And importantly, anything where it goes outside of your application to a third party. So it may be that actually, in order to ship out the goods or services that you have bought on Hackathon, don't buy anything on Hackathon, it's not real. We'd have to go to, I don't know, DHL or whoever sends things. So you would be sending that personal data over to them. So you would need to make sure that that third party themselves also was securing the data on behalf of your data subject, your customer, and that they were securing the data and using the data and processing the data in a way that was illegal. So lawful kitties back on the scene saying it has to be lawful processing. They would have to have the same retention period that you would have for that data or justify why they would keep it for longer. And if it's a controller-processor relationship, you would say that they could only use that data for the purpose of which the data subject has consented within your application, which is to buy the shit. So they shouldn't be then trying to use it for other things. So that's where your contracts come in, and that's really important as well, that you have clear contracts in place to ensure that you have joined up data privacy notices. one of the things that we basically say is, if you wouldn't expect to be contacted by somebody, or you wouldn't expect your data to be processed in a certain way, then you probably shouldn't do it. It's really just common sense from that perspective. So, it's all really easy saying, yeah, you should do these things. You know, don't allow the cross-site scripting, be careful about the SQL injection. But actually, it's a bit more complicated than that. So, we need to look at security tooling, and what kind of tooling that you can use if you're going to include this into the work that you need to do as testers. And I think this is where we start looking at the future of testing, and that testing is not just about testers and pen testers, or testers and security testers. Security testers and security researchers themselves have started to put together a lot of tools. We're starting to automate ourselves out of the job. This is no bad thing. We charge an awful lot of money to titter in a corner and go, ha! They didn't do this with the passwords. But actually a lot of it's really straightforward. And one of the most recent vulnerabilities that we found and released as part of our research was just basically going into a web application, reverse engineering it, and they literally had a button that said download all contacts. So we didn't, because you wouldn't do that. But we did find our own login in that. And that was 20,000 accounts of PII on a virtual reality porn application. So yes, they probably didn't want that to get out. It took us a while to get their attention and get them to fix it, but they did. And then we ended up in the news. Our finest hour was Daily Mail, when apparently we released their perverted secrets. We didn't, it was their names. Their email addresses, a few IP addresses. So we've got Burp Suite, and we've got Zap Proxy, which are both very useful for testing web apps. We've got Tracer, which is very good for Android. SQL Map, SQL injection. But also this is an opportunity for testers to look at the tools that they use as well and see how they can be adapted for security testing and bringing that testing in. Now, why do we want to do it in the dev pipeline? Why do we not want to wait until the end? Because it's really expensive getting pen testers in, and also the reports are mostly ignored. And once you've built something and the security testers come in and say everything is wrong, you then basically have to start again. So if you build it securely in the first instance, it's cheaper, it's more efficient, it will save you time, and it also means that you can demonstrate, not just to the ICO, but also to the customers themselves, that you're taking data protection and data privacy seriously, and you're taking their data seriously. We have talked about fines throughout the course of the evening. Don't worry about the fines, that's not your problem. 20 million euros, 4% of annual turnover. Basically, we don't know what the fines are going to be. That's the maximum fines. And all of the supervisory authorities will work in collusion to decide what they think the maximum fine should be. What you do need to worry about is that they can suspend you from processing. So if they think that you're processing in a way that is not compliant or not secure, they can make you stop doing it until it is. And if they think that you are being deliberately non-compliant, they can make you delete your databases. And that will put you out of business. So that's much worse than a fine. They will also name and shame you, and they do. The ICO record every action that they take on their database. It's a riveting read. I particularly like the one about Flight B. Do have a look. So, to recap, we've had an overview of the regulation. Not a riveting read it if you like. We've had a look at the governing principles. The kitties are judging you. We've had a look at how to be compliant in a snapshot and a space in time. But more importantly, we've had a look at a tool that's something that you can take home and you can have a look at and you can use, and you can actually start to build into your own training within your own working environments. We've looked at continuous integration and a way of actually mapping it in a way that makes sense to you. This is such a simple way of doing things. Functional mapping is really, really helpful. With my regulator hat on, I have worked with regulators, and I actually write standards and regulations, or in a previous life did for a living. This is how we create standards. This is literally what we do in order to create standards. So if you present this to a regulator, you're speaking in a language they understand. So they are immediately going to warm to this. They're going to see how you have taken it apart, they're going to see how you've broken it down, and they're going to see how just by this process in itself, you've looked at that gap analysis. And we've looked at the security tooling. So what other things can you do to empower yourself in a security environment, to become more secure, to think more secure, to think like the hackers? Well, you can join community groups. You can follow the security community on Twitter. They are very vocal. If you're not sure who to follow, find Manchester Grey Hats or DI Security and follow who we follow. You can basically, I did have a list of this and I've forgotten it, which probably would be helpful for you. Oh yeah, conferences. You can go to security conferences. And you can look at what the most recent tooling is from security researchers. So, if anybody's interested, those are our details there. Those are both the Twitter handles for me, for Jay, and for DI Security, so you can get in touch with us through either of those, friend us or DM us. We're both on LinkedIn as well. And if anybody's interested in coming along to Manchester Grey Hats, we do quite a lot of workshops that are very relevant. We've just done some stuff on Frida, which was really interesting. We haven't agreed what we're doing for next month, but I'm sure it'll be awesome because the guys who run it are brilliant. And we're always looking for volunteers and new members. So that's on the meetup page if anyone's interested in that.